all. Good morning. Welcome to our session, The Edge of Virtual Reality. We are excited to be discussing XR with experts from the field. I'm Lisa Flesher. You can find our full bios on the GSV app, but in the meantime, can you guys briefly introduce yourselves to the audience?
Hi everyone, I'm Amrutha. I'm the co-founder of Inspirit, and we're building a 3D STEM education metaverse platform for K-12.
Morning everyone, I'm Tom. I'm the co-founder of Immerse. We are a business building a VR ecosystem for enterprise.
Good morning, everyone. Mark Atkinson from Mursion. Mursion is an experiential reality simulation platform for what is pejoratively known as soft skills. We like to think of them as power skills.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eirik, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ludenso. We're building a learning universe in augmented reality.
All right. First question to whoever is willing to break the ice. So each of your organizations aims to leverage AR, VR, XR modalities to engage learners. What gaps do you think these modalities afford that maybe traditional learning does not?
I mean, I'll go. The one thing we know from every endeavor we've attempted to pursue in skills is that practice makes perfect. And if the one thing that's missing out of the learning stack is the ability to get repetitious practice under game-like situations. So if you think about leadership development, I can read about it, I can watch a model of it, but when the pressure is on and I've got to have that tough conversation that leads a team, I often never, ever have the opportunity to do it and practice it over and over again to get it right. And you think about all the things that we as leaders do, practice is missing from that element. Simulation is ready and XR makes it possible.
And something else that I think actually Immersion does really well is putting you in the shoes of someone else. So when you need that feeling of presence and when you need to learn by stepping into someone else's shoes, that's when VR in particular, like this immersive interactive medium, can really give you that teaching.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's this idea of putting people in situations that are extremely difficult to replicate in a classroom. And a lot of what we started off doing in the early days was sticking someone in front of a fire and seeing how they would react. Could they, follow the correct instructions? Would they go to the muster station wearing the right equipment? Now, trying to fake that, in a classroom is pretty hard. You need some very good actors to do that. But XR technology allows you to do that, at very low cost.
I think just looking at it from another perspective, not related to those fire experiences you can't really do at all, but just making everyday learning experiences more accessible and scalable than what they are today. I was very lucky in my biology class to see a real lung and to blow it up and see how it worked and how it functioned. But it's enormously much more scalable to see a 3D model of a lung and a heart and a skeleton, and to provide those learning experiences at scale to millions of students, make it more equitable and accessible. And I think that's a really powerful tool with VR and AR.
Great, thank you. Mark, Mursion identifies its purpose as education and not entertainment, but a lot of people associate VR and immersion with entertainment. Is this a hindrance to advancing it in education?
No. First of all, I don't think you sell a solution on the basis of the hardware that provides it. We don't position ourselves as VR. We are cross-platform. We sell into the enterprise for the most part, although we have about 80 schools of education and a lot of K-12 school districts starting to do this. We sell simulations, we sell practice, we sell the human skills that are associated with roles. So if it's K-12, we're giving people the opportunity to practice on fake kids before they go out into the real world and do what they do with real kids. If it's in healthcare, we're actually trying to give doctors the stressful circumstances where they sort of work on their bedside manner before they drive a lawsuit in a healthcare situation. And if you're a leader where it's either litigation or retention of team or the culture of your organization, we just want to give you the opportunity to practice it. It just so happens, for I think all the good reasons Amrutha said, that VR is a way of developing shared understanding, empathy, and getting really good data on how you come across, and so you can improve.
Yeah, thank you. Amrutha, can you talk about the importance of interactive learning versus specifically focusing on the immersion part of it?
So our platform is actually, we don't build it on VR devices. It's actually completely browser first, and it's like you can use it on Google Chrome, and we did this intentionally. So when we started out with the Google Cardboard, we built for the Oculus Quest, HTC Vive, and something that a lot of teachers really worry about when it comes to talking about XR is affordability and accessibility, because in order to use one of these headsets, you need a dark room, you need a 6 foot by 6 foot space, and you need money. It can be really, really expensive. And so we actually started right before COVID hit, and once COVID hit, we realized students weren't going back into the classroom anytime soon. Most students don't have access to headsets, but what kids were getting access to were mobile phones and laptops. And something that we learned from our research at Stanford and Georgia Tech was that it's actually the interaction that leads to a lot of learning. And I did mention that idea of presence, which is very important, which VR can help with, and that can be used for certain topics, but for us, since we're particularly involved in STEM learning, you don't need to necessarily have that feeling of presence, but rather students need to run different experiments. That's why you have science labs, and video games do this really, really well. So your Fortnite, your Minecraft, when I click on something or I hit a space bar, I see my character jump, or I pick up a block and I move it, right? I'm getting a reaction for an interaction that I'm doing. And so using those principles, which XR leverages really well through immersion, we kind of went the interaction route where we're like, we can rebuild a Fortnite or a Minecraft-like experience, take the best of gaming, and put it in a browser so that it's accessible and affordable to students around the world. And so I think if you're just getting started with XR and you don't have the budget, there are still a lot of really good principles that XR employs, but you can also get started just on a tablet or on a 2D screen that employs 3D principles.
Great, thank you. All right, another open question. So right now, Arizona State University is in the midst of a huge study to assess if we see increased learning outcomes in VR. What experiences have you had with this?
Well, I would say at the beginning, when we were first building solutions for our enterprise clients, there was absolutely zero focus on the data. It was, Tom, just build me that, and I'll tell you whether it's any good or not. I'll put the headset on a few of my people, and if they like it, then we can have a conversation that involves the data and your amazing platform. But don't, try and sell me the platform just yet. The big shift that we're seeing, and this is really happening in the last year, is that, that kind of why VR question for training and learning has been answered. No one is saying, no, get them all back in the classroom. It was much better doing those phony role plays. That's all gone now. So the dialogue that we're having with most of our customers and most of our partners is about the data. Tell me exactly how I can track whether someone can complete that task or not. And moving from this slightly binary view of assessment, of pass-fail, into something that really allows you to dig down much deeper, if that makes sense. So that kind of data focus now around everything that we build is front and center. So when someone starts off, they want to say, I want to measure these specific learning outcomes, and I'm going to judge you on that at the end of it.
We've had the good fortune of working with really strong researchers in teacher learning, and we started as a platform of a simulator for teaching. So funded by the Gates Foundation, the Schusterman Foundation, and the federal government, we've done 4 randomized control trials to look at change in pedagogical routines, particularly on working in inclusion practices in the classroom, and sort of try to measure the dosage of simulation that is necessary necessary to change a targeted behavior. So that could be a pedagogical, we've done them in subject matter routines in literacy and math. We've done it around just general topics like the effective use of open-ended questioning in a classroom. So, and what we've seen, generally speaking, and these are sort of small pedagogical, open-ended questioning is important, but it's not the totality of teaching. But if you're focused on it, in 3 or 4 simulations, we can change behavior in the simulator, and we do pre and post observation using standardized rubrics that a lot of the K-12 people know, and have seen a material change. We have really strong effect sizes in published studies that Gates and AIR has done, and a few different academic institutions have done. We've now begun to translate that into how do you see DE&I practices translate in context of leadership. We've done leadership trials, and like Tom, we're trying to get the predictive analytics that show us that people are directionally headed towards that behavior change, because the whole future for these organizations is kind of leaning into what is it going to take to improve culture and capability.
But that feels exciting, like 3 to 4 simulations to start seeing that improvement. That feels like a benchmark that's achievable, and that as we're encouraging new people to branch into these modalities, it doesn't feel like, oh, you've got to build 500 before you can ever make a difference, so good luck. Those numbers feel like you could make a pretty big difference quickly.
Yeah, it's very encouraging. The hard part for certainly in the corporate world, through e-learning, we've commoditized learning into just, sort of small doses of content, and we've lost the notion of constant practice. And so the challenge is to get people to persist at practice, and as a lot of people are starting to write, to embed practice in the flow of work so that training isn't some pull-out thing that you do. You learn how to give feedback in advance of doing an important performance review. You don't take a Friday off once a year and go work on feedback and then forget it when it's time. Like sort of that integration which technology makes possible now. And for those of us who build these systems, to integrate them with the other systems that are the workflow, so that training is just in time, whether it's technical like Tom's or around the sort of human skills that we work on.
Yep. Yeah, and it feels like a bit more, I'm a math major, and it feels like a bit more of a fun way versus repetitively writing, like practicing the same questions over and over and over, getting them into an immersive experience that feels more real world, real life, would kind of drive you to do a bit more of that repetitive practice, so that's great. Eirik, teacher adoption of these XR modalities is an important piece to navigate, and it's helpful when it's embedded actually into the curriculum. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think it's not enough that it's embedded into the curriculum. That's one of the 2 things that has to be in place, but the other thing that has to be in place is that it's very accessible and easy to use for the teachers. And we also did 2 research projects in Norway of how you can use 3D and AR in a beneficial way in K-12, where we're working. And having the teacher as an active, crucial role, asking critical questions about the usage and encouraging the students to use it in a good way is paramount. And we started out actually making a 3D modeling tool that allowed the kids to create their own 3D models, which they can then experience in AR. And it was amazing to see what kind of things they would create. I mean, one of the environmentally friendly houses they did for a Nature and Science project was a snail with like windmills as antennas. That was the future of housing, everyone. It was awesome. But the problem with that approach was that it was way too complicated for the teachers to start using it. And the approach we're taking now is that we're enabling publishers around the world to couple their physical and digital resources through AR and image recognition, bringing their textbooks to life. And that is a very powerful and simple approach for the teachers because they are used to using their textbooks. They're just doing the same thing, just a little bit different. So the threshold for starting to use AR technology and actually starting to use it as a weekly thing in their classroom is now getting to see a lot of traction. And I think that's really fascinating, and I'm very excited to see where we can go in the future.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I mean, what teacher does not want an engaged classroom? I mean, we all want everyone, like you're doing now, you're riveted by everything coming out of my mouth. I've got you. Every teacher wants that, and that's what these amazing technologies can do. It can help create this more engaging blend of learning.
Mm-hmm. And I was just say, I think it'll be important for us in coming years, like as we're sitting on organizations that are sort of building the content, the modalities for, we need to be thinking about how we're also building no-code solutions for the students, for the teachers to be building these things themselves, because talk about the best way to engage them and to know how it will be embedded in their content if they're the ones also becoming kind of the expert of that. And so finding that sweet spot of, you know, what do we do versus what do we have students and teachers do? Tom, what do you see, why do you see an increasing number of industries gravitating toward VR to meet training needs for their employees?
Because it works. I mean, very simply, that's the answer. And I think, as I was saying before, that first kind of experience was, okay, let me see whether this gets the engagement. And of course, it does. And now, once they've moved through that stage, now they're looking at this sort of broader application. And it's one of the amazing things about how this space is developing, the incredible stuff that Mark has been doing for quite a long time, and there are lots of other great new companies coming into this space that are thinking, well, actually you can apply this technology very broadly across a very, very wide range of skills. And so the potential use cases are now almost infinite. You know, that it was that starting point for us of, okay, go and put out the fire, but now it's covering, you know, the broadest possible range of different use cases, which is so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I know I've heard a couple of you mention the scale and accessibility side. Let's dive into that one a bit more, because that is what I think is a common theme that we hear from people is it's too expensive. How do we buy these headsets? What can we do? What's possible? How do we build these big platforms? So talk more about how you think we can begin to overcome that and show people that. I know, Amrutha, you talked about it probably the most, but what can we do to move that needle?
I mean, I'll echo what Amrutha said a little bit in that I think we work, for example, we're embedded in Western Governors University's methods courses in the School of Education, Teachers College. They serve the underserved. They don't have access to headsets. They barely have access to good bandwidth. And so I do think for a lot of us that are serving the underserved, you have to be cross-platform. You have to be in a way that they can get to it, because there is real value, and we're finding you can get a lot of the analytics. The analytics are at the highest level of fidelity in the pure VR experience. There's no question about that. But you could do a lot in the right simulated experience, cross-platform. As the industry, it is maturing as an industry. The devices are getting better and cheaper, and they're untethered, and they're not made in places where people are suspicious of the data. And you know, they're all things you got to navigate, and you need platforms that are going to serve as content management platforms that are going to have backward and forward compatibility. So if you build for them, you don't lose the thing you built last year. There's a lot of technical infrastructure evolving in VR that is making it there, and our approach, I think, is very similar to yours in the sense that we start with the simplest device and move up.
Yeah, I was just, in terms of making it accessible, I think it's also crucial to let the educators take part in the content creation of the content that is being consumed by the learners. And I think we're now going to see a lot more platforms opening up for educators to directly create, share, and distribute that content being created from them that makes the learners' content way more relevant than what it's been so far. I've seen a lot of AR for AR use in the classroom and by tech companies, and I think the big change is going to come when we have open platforms that allows the educators to truly create pedagogically valuable AR and VR experiences that can be experienced cross-platform on different devices.
I think it's very important not to get enamored by XR. So if you have a team that's implementing XR in your university or in your school, there always needs to be someone that's like skeptical of the technology. It's very, very important to ask yourself, do I need to do this in XR, or could I do this using an existing medium? Like, could I do it using a textbook? Could I use it doing video? Maybe do that instead, because XR can cause you a headache, right? Sometimes it's not as accessible for students. Now, that being said, I think everyone here is talking about items that you can't do using existing technology, right? So when you're creating a curriculum or a lesson plan, it's important to have a mix of different devices and different options, right, to make sure that it's accessible. So let's say I am from a really rich private school, I have access to a lot of money. There's a good chance I can buy a VR headset and give it to my students, but as people who are building these experiences, as Mark just mentioned, going cross-platform, that's really important. You should have a 3D model that students can use. Or maybe there's a student, like I get very dizzy in the headsets. I can't wear a headset for more than 15 minutes. And so can you create an experience that's under 10 minutes that teaches them exactly what they need to learn in those 10 minutes, and that's very powerful, and not you just saying, oh, here's this really cool VR experience. I don't know if it helped you, but it's very novel, and moving on from there. And I think that's a key piece for accessibility as well, because if you have a very strong use case for what you're teaching and how you're teaching, generally it's easy to find the funding, but it's very difficult to say, there's something that I can do in 2D, and I just want it to be in XR because it's cooler, and trying to get funding for that. So I think that's a key point for accessibility.
I wish I had just one person at my organization that was skeptical. I think I'm on the opposite side of that one. We've seen XR, AR, VR in STEM, in tech training, in the arts. What do you think might be a really untapped, arena that we'll see up and coming?
I have a vocational training. I think vocational training is so powerful. I was born and raised in India, where we have an engineering problem, and there are too many engineers and not enough jobs, and so vocational jobs actually pay you more. And using XR technology, even if you don't have the right teachers, it's so easy to teach people to be carpenters, electricians, plumbers, and take that in their own hands in a cheap way, and I don't think it's been tapped into enough. I know people are working on it, but it will get better.
I mean, so we could talk about training. I think in all of the social, so we're approached by people who want to do training in social work, in therapy, in counseling, all of that, because we're, again, on that sort of human interaction side, those domains, both the training, practice, and licensure. So, for those of you who know that the national medical boards had to shut down part of the medical license during COVID, because the way they do it is they fly people to remote centers and literally have them touch standardized patients and have conversations with standardized patients. That's a model that just doesn't work or scale for them. And there's so many other sort of professional licensure models in social work and therapy that work the same way. So that is an area where we're moving. I think there is a whole future in service delivery as well in VR. So one of the affordances is that VR, especially when you're delivering through avatars, it disintermediates your physical presence and your intellectual abilities from your body and limitations. So if you have a disability, you can show up as a character who presents very differently with the same expertise. If you think about what virtual banking is going to become, or what virtual shopping and commerce are going to become, all of these platforms are going to be using some of these same technologies in the not too distant future. I know because we've seen prototypes of it. And there's tons of power about giving people a sense of agency when their physical limits, sort of are greater than their mental capacity.
I think so. One other very good example that we've seen in the last year is using this 360 video to change culture and behavior within an organization. We work with a very large oil company that I'm not allowed to mention, but they wanted to implement a big DE&I program, and they created a series of 5 different short films that was putting you in the shoes of a black employee in this particular company. And it started with this individual driving to work, getting pulled over by 2 racist cops, and then it showed you how his day unraveled after that. It's very, very powerful, very uncomfortable viewing, but we thought an absolutely brilliant use of VR. And of course, as we're saying, it's most powerful when you're in the headset because it really feels like you're there. But you can, of course, run it on a mobile device or on a PC. And so, without wishing to sound too glib about what XR can do. It can cover many things because it delivers real impact. That's why I think it's such an exciting sort of group of different technologies.
Yeah. Someone was explaining to me the other day that they think we're right on the cusp of like the bottom of the exponential curve of what's going to happen with XR, like at the beginning of radio, at the beginning of TV. And so that exponential curve is daunting. So the analogy that was given to me is if you're in a huge football stadium and you're dripping water in exponentially, so 1 drop, 2 drops, 4 drops, 8 drops, in 35 seconds you would visibly be able to see water on the bottom of the field. In 4 minutes you would drown. Like, that's quick. Like, that's like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden. And so if we're truly, really at the bottom of this exponential curve, it's going, in the next 5 years are going to be insane. While you have a moment to be thinking about it, what, any of you or all 4 of you, what would you do differently if you could go back 5 years to prepare for this moment?
Many things, but please don't repeat them to my investors. I think to this point about creating content from the beginning that could run on multiple devices, that's something I would have done. I think I was was very early into the space and was a bit of a sort of evangelist nut job saying VR was going to solve every single problem. And of course, the devices then were not the kind of untethered mobile devices they are. You need lots of cables and trackers, and clearly they were never going to scale in an organization. So I definitely would have done that differently. And I think you're hearing the same thing from all of us, that whatever is built has got to run across multiple devices. I definitely would have done that differently.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've done many mistakes as well, not gonna lie. And I think it took us 2 years to figure out the real power of enabling educators themselves to create the content. And that took us 2 years. It should have taken us 3 months. So I would have given them that power earlier and started building for that at an earlier stage.
It's a really good question.
You've not made any mistakes, Mark?
No, I was trying to where to start at which part of the
one.
list to start with. No, I think, first of all startups, focus is everything, and when you're inventing something new, you listen a lot to your customers to figure out where the real pain points are. I actually think because we're playing with something that is so new, I wish we had just had a free, available, do anything you want with it, because I still feel like we're learning the boundaries of who can do this. So for us, ours is a blend of AI and real human performance. So the notion of who drives the difficult, natural language processing can't drive difficult conversations. And we do complex scenarios, and we hire professional actors to provide the spoken dialogue, and AI morphs them into multiple avatars in a real-time, spontaneous experience. But the fact is, most of the people in this audience could sit behind our simulations and drive them. And we didn't build for the audience, we built for the pros. And I now wish, because I think the audience is ready, and you scale faster with the big audience. So I would have done it a little differently to get to that same point.
I can go. We only started 2.5 years ago, so I don't have as much experience. But I think for us, COVID was actually very eye-opening, and I wish we had realized things that we realized through COVID sooner.
You wish we had COVID sooner?
I wish we had the realizations sooner without the actual event. But I think for us, we started out with Google Cardboard, definitely very enamored by the technology, which is why I'm saying what I'm saying today. And then we spent 6 months building for the Google Cardboard and Oculus Go, and then one day putting the same exact 3D models we had on the Oculus Quest. And we took it to a bunch of teachers in California, and all of them hated the Google Cardboard thing that we'd spent 6 months on, and they loved the Oculus Quest piece that we had done. And so I think something that I would have done is spend more time with teachers understanding the devices that they had access to rather than trying to push new tech on them necessarily. Again, this is because we're in the K-12 space. Obviously, we're all in very different spaces, but K-12 teachers don't have as much access, and we were trying to convince them to build VR labs and share devices and things like that, but very quickly, accessibility and affordability kind of came to the forefront. So if I could go back, I would have just skipped those 6 months or 1 year and gone straight to building for the web first. And now, because of Unity, and this is kind of technical, but if you build on Unity, you can very easily switch and become cross-platform. So I would have started in that respect, and I love that there's so much technology out there now that makes it so much easier to build in a sustainable way.
Yeah. Tell me what you guys think. One thing that I found, so I'm kind of answering the question, even though as the moderator I'm not supposed to. I've seen so much that we are completely undertapping youth. So whether we're at an educational organization like I am, or whether you're at a company and you can hire interns or youth, like this upcoming generation will run circles around us in their knowledge of XR and how they can build and the ideas that they have. And so how do you think we can better, be better stewards of our respective organizations and bring students up to the forefront, youth up to the forefront to be alongside us for ideation or for actually building?
We're trying to partner with some of our university partners to do just that, sort of create a apprenticeship program where they come right into either on the performance side or actually on the tech side, sort of what avatars are going to be like. I mean, we're used to the sort of cartoony little things, the things that we're able to do now and we're going to be able to do a year from now. Talk about your water rising fast. It's just unbelievable. And if you layer into that what you're able to do on the machine learning of sentiment analysis of voice and facial analysis to give people real-time feedback. There are kids who are really at the cutting edge of being able to do that stuff and belong as fast as we can get them.
Teenagers are so smart and they are so aware. And I'm realizing very quickly I was very dumb when I was a teenager. We do work directly with high school students, and so I actually had 100 high school interns last summer because we believe that if we could get the students to like our platform, then teachers would automatically be on board. So rather than building for the teachers, we were building for the students. And I think getting them involved in every aspect that you can as an early stage company is good. Just put them on your Slack channels, whatever group you're talking about. Get them to give you feedback about every discussion you're having. These kids are building on Roblox. There are like 12-year-old multi-millionaires that have released games, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they're the ones that are going to be using this tech soon. So if you are building something that you expect Gen Z to be using, I would just get them to give you feedback. And they're also brutally honest, which is very useful when you're building something.
Yeah, look, I would totally agree with that. I think we're doing a sort of similar thing where we're opening our core software developer kit open to 4 or 5 different universities. I mean, it is about creating this open, really collaborative approach rather than thinking that you've got all the answers yourself, because that's kind of dumb, obviously. And the more people that are developing on a platform, then the better it will be. There's no doubt about that at all.
I heard this morning at the keynote conversation around what are our ethics responsibilities as we get into these new platforms, because we've seen the missteps as we've gone into aggressive social media and other technology affordances over the last 15, 20 years. What are our responsibilities with these new modalities in XR? There's
a huge data issue, to be sure, right? So, in fact, we work with the virtual human interaction lab that Jeremy Bailenson runs at Stanford, where they've actually tried to think about data privacy in this issue. And it's not just the GDPR compliance requirement. These systems collect an enormous amount of really interesting, useful data. Whose is it? How can it be used? How can it be used? It's really critically important if we want to make the right steps moving forward. There are a ton of other issues, but that one certainly comes to mind.
A very simple one that actually came out of the same lab, surprisingly, is not to have children under the age of 12 using VR devices because they are very impressionable, and sometimes they start thinking that those were memories they actually had in real life. And so when building for VR, it's just, especially the immersive VR, I'm saying VR and not XR here. I still think XR can be used. But it's just important to think about your target audience as well.
I'm going to throw out a curveball. Does anyone want to try to define Meta? I feel like we hear it so much with Facebook
Meta,
branding.
the company, or the? I definitely don't want to define Meta in front of an audience. I don't mind having a go at the Metaverse, but.
Metaverse.
What is the Metaverse? Well, I think it's quite difficult to pin down, but it's really a kind of collection of different ecosystems that's kind of merging the digital and the real world. I think, probably for all of us on this stage, it has certainly helped the talk about the metaverse, and by God, there's a lot of it. I think, not that I'm looking to be the spokesman for the four of us, but I think we're all kind of solving real problems now, and have been for the last few years. And I think a lot of what is perhaps a bit unhelpful about the metaverse talk is that it's very forward-looking. And to me, having been dabbling around with Second Life 10 years ago, it feels a bit like that all over again, if I can say so. But
yeah, I would actually try to describe the metaverse as you can have two distinct types of metaverse. There's the metaverse that Mark Zuckerberg is talking about, where you are in the virtual world and you can connect and access different types of games and experiences and be social with each other. But that requires you to be in a totally virtual space. You can access that virtual space by using an iPad as well or a computer, but it is a virtual space. And then you have the real world metaverse, which is what Niantic and also to some extent Microsoft is talking about, where you lay a digital overlay on the real world, where you get access to the real world and real events, but with a digital layer on top of it. That can be that the books are coming to life, or that you have geolocation-based AR experiences that is only accessible in certain locations. And I think these two metaverses will develop quite distinctly from each other before they will eventually merge, say 20 to plus years in the future. But I think we will have those two metaverses developing distinctly from each other in the coming decades.
What do I think? I think this is what Silicon Valley does great. Like, it comes up with a really big idea, but it's not even the blind man and the elephant, it's like the blind man and the zoo. Like, most people have no idea, so you need me to tell you what the metaverse is. I don't know what it is. I think that there are new technologies that, when you think about just really good design for learning, that can be deployed in conjunction with other things to get more powerful outcomes. And if anybody tells you they know what it is, I would not believe them.
I agree with Mark. I think it's more branding than anything else. For us, it's just been easy to explain what we do, because if I say metaverse, someone has like an idea in their head, and then it's just easy. For the last 2.5 years, trying to explain, oh, we're an interactive 3D learning platform, everyone just stared at me like I was speaking gibberish. And so I think, similar to what Eirik said, it is really merging that digital and real life, but we've been doing that for years now, and so it's nothing new. It's just a new brand that's gone on top of it.
Okay, final question, about 30 seconds. What do you want the audience to take away about you, your company, where you're headed? Eirik, we'll start with you.
All right. I think we are going to be the leading platform for content creation in AR and what I just called the real-life metaverse. So if you want to chat more about that afterwards, I'll be standing right here. Thanks.
If you care about the human skills around leadership, around sales, customer service, or education, where performance matters in real time under stress, please talk to us.
I would just go out with a message saying to everyone in this room, be more curious. Try and do stuff. You can do a lot of the creation of content at much, much lower cost. Get a headset on and begin to explore. That's what I would encourage you to do.
And I would say something similar. Try to find the gaps in education today and see if XR can fill it. We're working on filling in the gaps in STEM education and hopefully building a free platform that can be accessed by all. But yeah, good luck to all of you.
Thank you, everybody.